This is where real conversations happen. Welcome to Sit Down Sundays on the Final Boss podcast, where the movers, the creators, the ones really making things shake, pull up, sit down and talk different. No filters, no fluff, just raw stories, real journeys, and the mindset behind success. From influencers to entrepreneurs to visionaries turning ideas into empires, we tap in with the people who don't just talk about it, they live it. This ain't just an interview, this is a seat at the table. So lock in, listen close, and learn how bosses move. Sit Down Sundays, only on the Final Boss podcast. New era, same boss.
Welcome to Sunday night edition of the Final Boss Podcast. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. And look, I know we're a couple minutes late, man, but you know what? It's 9 o'clock somewhere. It is 9 o'clock somewhere. So without further ado, listen, I have a great show for you tonight, man. I missed you guys. I hope y'all missed me and all my joy and the knowledge that I'm bringing to you guys, man. I hope you missed me like I missed you, because trust me, I missed each and every last single one of you. And, you know, we got a great show, man. We're going to group right into it in a few, as we do. Look, there's been some things that I've been working on that's been keeping me quite busy, right? And you're going to see that very, very soon. I'm dropping an app. It's called Vital Signal. You're going to see it. I did an episode the other night in reference to Vital Signal. So if you don't know what Vital Signal is, go watch the special edition episode that I just dropped the other night, right? We were going to go live, but, you know, I'm finishing up some kinks. It wasn't quite, I'm not going to say it wasn't polished. It's finished. But there were some things that I need to touch up on. Some dotting of the I's and crossing of the T's, right? You know how we do. So if this is your first time joining us, we greatly appreciate you, man. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here, right? This is the Final Boss Podcast. I am the one, the only, the Final Boss. And this is the Final Boss Podcast, Final Boss Journey, Final Boss Family, Final Boss Network, right? Final Boss Society. Final Boss everything. Right? So look, man, before we get into tonight's show, look, if you haven't, check the link. I dropped the link. Go get Go Time 1. All aboard the fired up train. Go Time 2 is on its way, man. Go Time 2 is on its way. It'll be here probably in the next week or two, man. Go Time 2. The train has left the station. Will be here in a week or two, on top of the app that's coming out, man. Vital Signal. So we've been quite busy over here, right? We've been quite busy, if I must say so myself. Listen, we talked about the book. Look, if you haven't, go catch up on our episodes, man. Go catch up on all of our episodes on the website at thefinalbosspodcast.com. thefinalbosspodcast.com, www.thefinalbosspodcast.com. You can see all of our episodes, right? We're at episode number 278. This is season 4, arc 5, man. Arc 5, the declaration. We're on our way to season 5, the harvest, man. Season 5, the harvest will be here before you know it. I'm so excited, man. The harvest means a lot, man. And I hope you guys are here with me as we get through all of this, right? We have what? 18 episodes to go? No. Yeah. No. We got 22 episodes to go. My math is wrong. I'm looking at different screens. I'm like, wait a minute. How so go check that out, man. Go check it out. Go check it out, man. Episode 300, the harvest is on its way. Tonight, man, we're going to get ready to get into it in a few. Look, Keep your emails coming, man. Keep your emails coming. Keep your emails coming at info@thefinalbosspodcast.com. We're going to be dropping another town hall very soon. So if you're interested in being a part of the town hall, please keep the emails coming, man, so we can get you out there in front of everybody with your questions, concerns, or anything that is on your heart. We're going to bring it to you on the town hall, right? On the town hall. Now, I know we starting late. Listen. It's been a while, right? It's been a while. I had to dust off the equipment and do all the things, man. Updates. You know how it is, man. This technology is right. Technology, it does what it wants to do a lot of times. So, yeah. Anyway, so tonight's episode 278, and I don't know what that's about, but 278 is our episode. And let's talk about something. There's a lot of events that are taking place right now, right? In our world, in our communities. Politics, man. There's a lot going on, and we're gonna get into it. We're going to get into it. Like I said, this is episode number 278, season 4, arc 5. And before we get into it, man, let's get into the brass tacks. We got a short brass tacks tonight. Tonight's brass tacks is this. And this goes for you and whatever you got going on in your world. So pay attention. Pay attention. Class is in session. And I'm back, baby. I'm back, right? 5 days a week, 9 p.m. 5 days a week at 9 p.m. So here is tonight's brass tacks. Hesitation is a turnover every single time. Every single time, hesitation is a turnover. So that's our brass tacks of the evening. Hesitation is a turnover. You probably hear me saying it throughout the evening, man, because it's a short one. We don't usually have brass tacks that short. So because it's so short and relevant, I might drop it a few more times throughout the evening. As a matter of fact, go write it down. Write it down. Hesitation is a turnover every single time. Post it on your kitchen wall. Post it in your bathroom, man. Tattoo to your forehead. Look, hear what I got to say, right? Because the world and what it's going through right now just showed you its whole defense, right? We're talking about on multiple fronts. We're talking about disguised coverages, right? A ceasefire plan getting announced in one headline and tested by a strike in the next, right? We've been seeing that game plan, right? We've been watching it. We've been paying attention. A tanker hit near a choke point that moves a fifth of the planet's energy happening right now, right? Favorites getting bounced on the biggest stages, whether that's a market, a matchup, or negotiating table. Most people are still standing in the huddle trying to figure out what they're even looking at. People are running around with their head cut off because they're so confused, right? I'm calling the playbook, and I already called this play, right? Stick with me. Stick with me. Because by the time this show is over, you're going to know the exact 4-play sequence that I run when everything around me looks like chaos. And you're going to understand why the team that hesitates never scores, right? The team that hesitates never scores. So, like I said, man, this is season 4 of the rebirth, right? And rebirth taught you that it taught you who you are, right? You remember that. You remember who you are, right? It taught you who you are. And after the fire went out and you had to rebuild from the ash, that work is now behind you. The declaration is a different kind of season. It's a different kind of arc, right? It's not about proving you survived. It's about proving that you can lead, right? Proving that you can lead. And leadership, I mean real leadership, looks exactly like what happens on the NFL sideline with the clock running out and the season is on the line, right? Shout out to my Rams. Shout out to Sean McVay. Shout out to the Los Angeles Rams, man. That's my team. Everybody knows that. This is the Los Angeles Rams East Coast headquarters, right? Season is about to begin, right? Shout out to QB number 1, Matthew Stafford, right? So, leadership on the sideline of a football game, right? With the season on the line. The head coach doesn't get the luxury of waiting for clarity. He gets a play clock, 40 seconds, sometimes even less. And you got to drive down the field. The stadium is loud. The defense is disguising its intentions, and every single person in the building has an opinion about what he should call next, like they're the experts. He doesn't have time to poll the crowd. He has a system. He has film study, right? That's behind him. And he has a decision to make before the clock runs out. 40 seconds on the clock, right? That's the posture I want you to borrow tonight and think about it and sit with it, right? Think about it and sit with it for a second, right? Not the panic of a team getting run out of the building because it never had a plan. We're talking about the composure of a coach who already studied the film, already knows the tendencies and calls the next play before the crowd even finishes reacting to the last one, right? The declaration isn't a vibe. It's a discipline, and the discipline starts with refusing to let the moment call the play for you, right? Here's what most people get backwards. They think play calling is about having perfect information. It's not, right? Coaches never perfect information. They have imperfect information and a system for acting decisively inside that imperfection. Anyway, right? That's the entire skill. Not eliminating uncertainty, but operating powerfully within it. And if you're waiting for the fog to clear completely before you move, you've already lost the down, right? Because the fog on Sunday afternoon never fully clears. It just shifts from one disguise to another, right? From one disguise to another. Now, I built this episode around football, right? Because the football season is about to start, right? And the highlights of the game is they're showing all types of highlights, man, and the different people who may be coming back. Maybe, right? Maybe coming back. Shout out to number 99, AD, right? Listen, boy, man. Listen, if AD comes back, bro, it's going to be ridiculous. It's going to be ridiculous, right? But this is what I want you to know, right? Like I just said, I built this episode around football because football gives us a clean, visible language for something we live inside of every single day without even naming it. Every relationship, every business decision, every parenting choice, every dollar you deploy is a play call made under a shot clock with incomplete information in front of people who are watching to see if you flinch. Tonight, we're not learning a new skill. We're naming a skill you already have and sharpening the sequence you run in on it, right? 4 plays, man, 4 plays, right? That's the whole system. And I'm handing you the playbook of the 4 plays, right? Not 40, not a playbook the size of a phone book, right? That you'll never actually use under pressure. We're talking about 4 calls, running sequence, right? Cover, control, information, timing, and finish. If you walk away from this this episode, right? If you walk away from this episode during this period, nothing else, right? I mean, nothing else. Listen, walking away knowing those 4 words, I just gave them to you, right? Because the declaration is going to ask you to use them before Arc 5 closes at episode 300, right? So, look. Oh, one more thing, right? One more thing I need to tell you guys, man. One more thing, right? One more thing before we move into the sequence itself, right? Notice that I said run in sequence, not run whichever one feels good about or whatever direction you feel good about running into for that moment. And that right there is very important. That's the distinction that is going to matter more than anything else in this episode, because the order these plays get called is not a decoration. It's the difference between a drive that scores and a drive that stalls, and it stalls out on third down, right? 3rd and inches, and it stalls out, trying to look impressive, and you accomplish nothing, right? So, if you already heard, right? If you already heard the standard for tonight in front of the brass tacks, if you already heard the brass tacks, right? You're supposed to have written it and taped it to your forehead, tattooed to your forehead, right? Put it up somewhere, because I'm not going to be reintroducing it yet. I will, but not right now. I'm putting weight on it right now, so that's why I asked you to let it sit with you, because a standard that only lives in the front matter never actually changes how anybody plays the game, right? A team can print a motto on the locker, in the locker room, put it on the wall, and still lose every close game of that season, right? Because a wall doesn't make decisions. Players do. Standards only mean something once they show up inside an actual decision, with actual pressure, with something real on the line, right? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about it, man, right? Let's talk about what it costs to genuinely live by that standard instead of just quoting the standard, right? In football, protecting the ball sounds simple until you're the one holding it, right? Until you're the one holding it, and you're holding it in a crowded pocket, right? With a free rusher closing in fast, and he weighs about 350 pounds, and he's running, and he'll beat to you in 2 seconds, right? Full speed, right? The coaching point is always the same. Get rid of it or take the sack, right? That's what the court QB has to do. Get rid of it or take the sack, right? Whatever gets said out loud is how much discipline that moment actually requires. Because every instinct in a scrambling quarterback's body is screaming at him to force something, anything, right? Rather than accept the loss cleanly. Taking a sack on purpose, protecting the ball, choosing the smaller controlled loss over the uncontrolled one, right? It's one of the hardest things to teach in this game, right? Because it runs against every competitive instinct that a player has, right? Every instinct, man, right? So that's the exact tension most of you are living in right now, right? I called it out. Yeah. And most of you don't have a coach standing on the sideline reminding you which choice you actually need to take to protect the drive. You're the quarterback and the coordinator at the same time, every single day, every week, every hour, every minute, every second, and on every single decision, right? Nobody's calling the sack for you. You have to recognize the pocket collapsing on your own and choose the discipline loss over the disaster, or recognize the open lane and take it without anybody standing over you and your shoulder confirming it, right? And here's what I need you to do that's different tonight, right? Because this is where most people get the standard wrong, right? Protecting the ball is not the same thing as never throwing it. A quarterback who never throws downfield doesn't protect anything. He just guarantees his own offense never scores. The standard was never zero risk. The standard was zero unforced risk. Zero decisions made out of panic instead of preparation. Zero throws into a coverage you never actually studied because you were too busy being afraid of the moment to read the field in front of you, right? And that's the weight behind tonight's episode. That's the weight of tonight's standard. Not caution for its own sake, but preparation married to conviction. So that when the pocket collapses or the lane opens, you already know which one you're looking at because you did the film study and you did it before the game. You did it before the game started, right? Instead of trying to do it live under the bright, shiny lights and the crowd already screaming at you to make a decision. And I want you to carry that. And I want you to sit on that that thought right there, right? I want you to sit on that. I want you to sit on that, man, and think about that, right? You're in a big game and you got to make a decision, right? I need you to carry that distinction. And I need you to carry that distinction into everything else that we're going to be talking about tonight. Because the 4 plays coming up in the rest of the episode are not a system for eliminating risks in your life, but it's a system for making sure the risk you do take is the risk you actually choose, right? And you're prepared on your own terms instead of the risk that gets forced on you by a defense you never bothered to study, right? Now I need you to hold that distinction, man, because through the rest of this, man, every play from here forward is built on the same principle. Prepared conviction, not blind aggression. That's the weight and that's the standard, right? That's the weight and that's the standard. So, ooh, I need something to drink. Now let me make this real instead of theoretical, right? Because that's the only way this episode is going to touch your ears, and it's going to earn the respect and earn for me to be able to ask anything of you, right? Listen, you already know my story, man. I spent 23 years in federal service, right? I was deployed 3 times, dual theaters, combat veteran, right? Branch chief, right? Y'all know my story. Listen, here's building towards a pension trajectory worth a significant amount for retirement across over that full career, which was a stable situation. It was predictable. It was comfortable, right? It was well respected. But every box the system tells you to check gets checked. And there was a version of me that could have stayed in the formation for another decade, running the safe plays every single down, because the safe play was still moving. It was still moving the chains a little, just a little, right? 3rd and inches. And nobody would have questioned it. Nobody would have called it hesitation. They would have called it wisdom, right? They would have called it stability. And they would have said, oh, man, that man is someone who knows how to finish what he started, right? But I didn't stay in that formation, right? I didn't. And here I am today, walking into the danger zone, right? The danger zone. I start my doctoral program in 29 days in artificial intelligence, right? I'm constantly building with no foresight of what the end is going to look like. The other situation, I know exactly what the end was going to look like. I was going to retire, right? And be comfortable, right? But instead, I'm here 5 days a week at 9 p.m. talking to you guys on this microphone, right? Without even a guarantee that something is going to happen afterwards, right? There's no pension, right? There's no institutional credibility. There's nothing carrying it automatically into the new arena. And I touch new arenas, it seems like almost every week, right? We got a new app that's getting ready to drop. Vital Signal is going to change the world, right? All I had is preparation, conviction, discipline, and a willingness to call a play that had real permanent downside if it didn't work, right? If it doesn't work. And that's the cost. Real specific. And still being paid down every single month, I choose building over comfort. And I'm not telling you to do this. I'm not telling you to do this, right? So you can clap, or I'm not telling you this in vanity. I'm telling you this in comparison to what I'm talking about with the game, right? I'm telling you this because I need you to be impressed, right? I'm telling you this because I need you to understand the play call. Because the play call only means something when there's an actual cost attached to calling it. Anybody can call a strategy from the sideline of a game. Anybody can do that, especially if they never played it, right? Especially if they never played it. Anybody can build a 4-play sequence for you to run while their own ball stays safely tucked away in a formation that guarantees the outcome. That's not a coach. That's a commentator, right? And I'm not commentating tonight. I gave a guaranteed, right? The structure, the institution, the identity, right? To run the exact playbook myself, become my own coach. And I wanted to be honest about something else too. It didn't feel like conviction at the moment. It felt like standing at the goal line with the season on the line and no certainty that the wedge play was going to work. All I had was conviction, real conviction. Almost and that almost never feels like confidence while you're calling it. It feels like calling a play anyway, in spite of the fact that you can't see the outcome yet. So when I tell you hesitation is a turnover, understand where that's coming from. Not a theory, a specific number, a specific career, a specific situation of 23 years that I traded in for a playbook I had to build from nothing, live and in front of a growing Final Boss community that I'm very proud of, that was watching to see if I could actually run what I was preaching. And tonight's 4 plays aren't abstracts or abstractions, right? They're the sequence I ran to get from the decision to do this on the microphone. I say all of that, right? Not to center myself in the story tonight, but so you know the cost confession I'm asking you to run it in your own life. Because being asked from the sideline isn't being asked from somebody who pays specific, calculable, right? And still ongoing price to earn the right to ask it, right? So if you turn on your feed right now, you'll see it. You'll see it. we're under another ceasefire, right? The ceasefire framework, right? It gets announced. It gets announced in one region, while strikes land within 48 hours in another. A tanker gets taken out by an unknown projectile near a strait that carries roughly a fifth of the planet's oil and gas, and nobody can say definitively who fired it, right? Drone threats get intercepted over Gulf airspace the same week diplomats are sitting down at the table trying to build a peace roadmap. A hospital takes a direct hit less than 2 days after a ceasefire advancement goes announced from the highest levels. That's not one crisis, people. That's a defense showing you multiple fronts and disguised coverage at the exact same time, daring you to guess wrong about where the real pressure is actually coming from. Because most people watch that and feel helpless because they're trying to read it in a way a fan reads the game from the sidelines, reacting to whatever the camera shows them last. The headline that lands at 9 a.m. becomes the entire read of the situation. And then the headline at 2 p.m. contradicts it. And now they're not reading the defense anymore. They're just getting whiplash by it. Snap after snap with no system underneath their reactions. A play caller reads it differently, right? A play caller assumes the defense wants you confused, wants you reactive, wants you spending your attention on the disguise instead of the actual play development underneath it. Disguise coverage in football exists for exactly one purpose: to get the quarterback to make his decision based on what he thinks he sees instead of what's actually there. The best defense in the world aren't the ones with the most talent. They're the ones best at making chaos look meaningful and meaning look like chaos until you can't tell the difference anymore, right? Until you can't tell the difference anymore. And tonight I'm giving you the 4 calls, right? I run when the coverage I run when the coverage looks like this, man. So pay attention, right? Not because I can control what's happening, not because I can predict the ceasefires or what's going to be on the next headline. All that contradicts the thing before it, right? And I can't do that. Nobody's sitting in this community can do that, right? And if you can, listen, send me some lottery numbers, right? If you can do that, send me some lottery numbers. But look, what I can control is what I understand. And it's the same thing that you can control. And what you can control is your own huddle in your own life, right? Your own point of attack, your own read on your own situation, whatever multiple fronts are showing up in your life right now, whatever disguised coverage is making your next move look more confusing than it actually needs to be, then you need to hear this, right? Because this is the reframe for the declaration, and the declaration requires it. Global volatility isn't something you're supposed to solve from your living room, but everybody is screaming at their TVs. Everybody is yelling, he's stupid. You don't know what he's listening, screaming at the TV, right? Like a fan in the sideline of a game, and you're trying to tell the coach what play to play next, right? It's something you're supposed to use as film study. Watch how the disguise works out there, right? So you stop falling for the disguise in here, right? In your own businesses, in your own relationships, in your own decision-making under pressure. The world is running a defense right now. And That's not a reason to freeze. That's the exact reason to call the play. Keep the refrain in the pocket every time feed gets loud this week, right? You're not powerless because you can't fix the headline. You're a student of the headline and studying how disguises works at scale so your own read gets sharper every single time somebody else's flashes across the screen, right? That's the play, right? Now pay attention. Pay attention, because every drive starts the same way in my playbook, right? Control the point of attack, right? Control the point of attack before you try anything else. The HORMUZ straight is a downhill power run. Lead blocker clears the gap before the read ever even develops, right? No wasted motion, no cleverness, just controlled force applied exactly where it needs to go. It's not the play that makes the highlight reel. It's the play that makes every other play in the drive possible, because it establishes something the defense now has to respect on every single down that follows, right? Listen, I named this play after the straight itself on purpose, right? Now, mind you, look, man, I'm speaking figuratively and of course with metaphors. So, you know, war isn't listen, war isn't a good thing. I've been to 2 wars. Combat, listen, it's not. And I'm not making a play of it. People on both sides are dying, right? So let me continue, right? I named it this because the straight is the perfect real world teacher for this concept, right? Because the fifth of the world's oil and gas moves through one narrow point of power of water, right? And you control that point, and you control leverage over an enormous system downstream of it, right? Less control of, watch what happens. You lose control of that point, and every downstream system, shipping insurance, fuel prices, national economies, feels and falls within days, right? That's a choke point. Not one priority among many. The single point where control determines whether everything else downstream stays stable or it starts to shake, right? The lesson here translates a little bit differently, right? Because before you chase the big play, the exciting deal, the public move, the thing that gets applause, you have to secure the choke point in your own life first. That's your income stability, right? That's your core relationships. The 2 or 3 people whose trust, if it broke, would destabilize everything else you're trying to build, right? That's your non-negotiable daily disciplines, and that belongs to the ones who don't feel important on any single day, but compound into everything you're capable of on days that matter the most, right? Days that matter the most. You don't get to run the play, right? You don't get to run the play, right? And you don't get to run the play action, right? And you can't run the play action off a fake. If you never establish a run game first. That's not how football works, right? And that's not a football rule. That's a law of sequencing. Play action only works because defense has been forced to respect the run. If you never controlled your point of attack first, then there's nothing for anybody to respect. Nothing underneath the fake. And the whole sequence collapses the moment somebody tests it, right? And now look, I see people skip this thought process all the time, constantly, right? They want the sovereign wedge energy, the highlight, the finish, the goal line conviction without ever running the HORMUZ straight first. They want the billions and billions upon billions of dollars and accolades first. They want to declare a big vision without ever locking down the point of failure that would take the whole vision out if it was broke, right? That's not boldness. That's building on sand and calling it architecture, right? You have to control your point of attack. You have to control your point of attack. And that's play one every time, no exceptions. No matter how tempting it is to skip straight to the exciting part of the actual drive. Everything else in tonight's sequence assumes this play has already been run. So before you move out of your chairs, out of your seats, off the couch, listen, make sure you've already actually done the identification work, right? Not just nodding along, saying, yeah. No, I'm talking about some real stuff right now, right? If you can't name your choke point in one sentence right now, then that itself is the finding. That's what we need to work on, right? And don't confuse your choke point with your biggest problems. Sometimes the loudest problem in your life is the downstream at the choke point and the choke point itself. You need to chase the source, right? Not the symptom. And the whole rest of the drive gets easier to call, right? Where my football fans at, right? Where my football fans, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? So let's strip the football language out for a second and strip the geopolitics out too, right? Let's take all the politics out too, right? Because I don't want anybody listening tonight to think that this only applies to coaches and foreign ministries, right? It applies to your business. The choke point might be your cash flow. The one lever that if it breaks everything downstream of it, right? You can have a great product, a loyal customer base, and a strong team. And none of it matters if the cash flow choke point closes, because everything downstream of it stops moving the same week and it crashes. Let's talk about your health, right? The choke point is usually sleep, not diet, not the workout program, not the supplement stack everybody's selling you, but sleep. Because sleep is the single point that when it closes, degrades your decision-making, your discipline, your mood, and your recovery all at once. Silently, right? In a way that makes every other health effort you're making less effective than it should be, right? Let's talk about your relationships, right? The choke point is almost always the one conversation you keep avoiding. The one that you've been rehearsing in your head 50 times and never actually had. That conversation sits in the narrowest point of the whole relationship and everything downstream of it, right? The trust, the intimacy, the ability to build anything real together is being quietly restricted by the fact that you haven't controlled that choke point yet, right? And here's the identification test that I want you to run tonight and run this week, right? A choke point is whatever it affects if it closes, shuts down everything behind it. Not whatever feels urgent today, not whatever is the loudest thing in your notifications, but the actual structural point where if it fails, the whole system fails with it. Most people can't name their choke point, right? Not because it's hidden, but because naming it means admitting that you've been avoiding it, and avoidance is more comfortable than the 8-week stretch of discomfort it would take to actually secure it. Now, listen, I'm telling you this from a point of experience and a point of action. The other day, I had a choke point moment, right? My cell phone, I had misplaced it, right? I do everything on my cell phones, everything, right? And it's on one particular cell phone. Now, I had the other cell phone for other reasons, but I didn't have any redundancy in place, right? I lost the phone, and immediately I panicked, and I started building the redundancy. And I said, man, I should have did this a long time ago. That was a choke point for me, right? Now, I was down for a couple hours, right? And when you're down, you're losing, right? And you can't afford to lose. So identify yours. Identify your choke points, right? And it doesn't have to be 5 things. We're talking about one thing, right? And I know the instinct is for you guys to make a list, right? Because the list feels productive and a single point feels exposed. Resist the instinct tonight. The single point where if you don't establish control first, nothing else you build downstream is going to be stable. That's the only thing I need you to write down on tonight's list, right? Write it down before this episode ends, right? And then we're going to talk about it. Meanwhile, the HORMUZ Straight is still fresh in everyone's ears. Everything else in this episode, every play that follows, assumes you've already done this work, right? Multi-front motion doesn't help you if your choke point is still exposed. Sovereign wedge definitely doesn't help you because a goal line push means nothing in the foundation underneath it was ever secured, right? Control the choke point first. That's not the exciting part of the declaration. It is the part that makes the rest of the real instead of performance, right? Now, say this with me, right? Say it with me out loud, right? Say this with me, right? I'm gonna give you a couple minutes, not minutes, a couple seconds. Say it. Say, my choke point is fill in the blank, right? And say it out loud, not just on paper, right? Because there's a difference between writing a truth down privately and hearing your own voice commit to it, right? And tonight, I want you to hear yourself say it. That sentence is the whole assignment, right? The whole assignment. Not a 5-point action, but one honest sentence spoken out loud in your own voice, right? In your own space. My choke point is, remember, fill in the blank, right? Fill in the blank. Now that you've done that, play actions only works because the defense believes the run is real. The quarterback fakes the handoff. The linebackers step up to fill the gap, and they've trained to respect. They've been trained to respect. And for 1.5 seconds, the entire defense commits to a play that isn't actually happening. That's the gap. The moment of false calm, right, is exactly where the real play develops. And it's over the top, behind the defense, while everybody's eyes are still on the fake. The moment things look calm, most people relax their guard completely. A ceasefire plan gets announced, and the instinct is to exhale fully, right? Ceasefire, right? But you assume the hard part is over. A market stabilizes for a week, and the instinct is to stop watching it closely. And a hard conversation goes quiet for a stretch, and the instinct is to assume it resolved itself. We're watching that exact same pattern day in and day out play out in real time right in front of our eyes. Headlines about peace roadmaps sitting in the same news cycle as headlines about strikes and tanker attacks near the very choke point we just spent a few minutes talking about. The calm and the danger are happening in the same 24 hours. Sometimes the same headline block. And the most people are only built to register one signal at a time. There's multiple frequencies at play. Two lessons live inside of that play. And I want you to hold on to both of them at once because that's the actual skill, right? First, don't get caught flat-footed by the opponent's play action. When something around you looks unusually calm, a client goes quiet. A competitor goes suspiciously friendly. A problem that used to be loud suddenly stops making noise. That's exactly when your discipline should sharpen, not soften. Calm is not the same thing as resolved. Sometimes calm is just the fake before the real play develops over the top of you, right? And second, and this is the part people miss because they're too busy defending against being faked out, that they forget offense exists too. Use calm strategically yourself. When you've built real trust and real stability with someone, a client, a partner, a team, that stability is not just protection. It's a weapon, right? That's your window to take the bold move nobody sees coming because they've stopped watching closely. Not because you're being deceptive, but because genuine stability earns you room to move that chaos never does. Play action isn't a trick you run on people you're deceiving. It's a play you run because you've already established something real enough that the defense has to respect it. And respect creates exactly the opening you need, right? That's exactly what you need, right? And this is where you've earned the real calm, right? Don't waste it sitting still. You need to take action. And that's the whole lesson of the ceasefire play. It's action. It's the play most people run backwards without even realizing it. They relax when they should sharpen, and they sit still when they've actually earned the right to move. Flip the pattern and flip it this week and watch how much of what felt like bad timing was actually just the wrong read anyway, right? You know, pre-snaps exist for a reason, right? You get a pre-snap motion and you force the defense to reveal itself before the ball is even snapped. You send a receiver in motion across the formation and you watch how the defense reacts. They do, what do they do? They shift the linebacker to match him, right? Does a safety rotate? Does nobody move at all? Which tells you something completely different. Because by the time the ball is actually snapped, you know something you didn't know 5 seconds earlier. And you got the information for free before any real risk was taken. That's not indecision. And I want to be very clear about that, right? Because the surface motion can look like stalling, like a quarterback who isn't really ready to commit. It's actually the opposite. It's the active intelligence gathering built directly into the play, designed by coaches who understood something most people never learn. And that's information gathered before commitment is worth more than the same information gathered after you've already locked in. Look, man, too many people treat having a plan as the same thing as locking into a plan before you even have the information. Those are not the same thing. And confusing them is one of the most expensive mistakes that I watch people make today in business and in their walk in life, right? They draw up the real conditions, they show up, and because adjusting would mean admitting the original plan wasn't perfect. And that's not conviction. That's ego wearing conviction's uniform, right? We're talking about multi-front motion, which says build it in a moment, build it early, and build it cheap, right? where you force the situation to show its hands, then commit fully once it does. Then you ask the direct question instead of guessing the answer. Send the trail balling or the trial balloon before you launch the full campaign. Take the small test action, the pilot version, the low stakes version of the hard conversation. Before you go all in high stakes version, whatever your version of motion is, use it before you're forced to guess blindly under real pressure, right? And here's why that matters, specifically inside of the world showing you multiple fronts right now, right? Because when coverage, right, when coverage is disguised, and we already established tonight that it is, motion is how you make the defense declare itself without paying full price to find out. You don't need to solve the entire situation before you move. You need one cheap, deliberate action that gets the world or your business or another person in the room to reveal a little more of their actual position than they were showing before. Then you take the information and you call the next play with real conviction instead of a guess dressed up as one, right? Multi-front motion isn't the flashy play in the sequence. It's the play that makes every play after it smarter, right? Don't skip it because it doesn't look bold. It's the reason the sovereign wedge works. 2 plays from now doesn't have to be a gamble. You pick one situation in your life right now that feels frozen because you don't have enough information. Then pick the cheapest possible action that would force the situation to reveal something. Run it this week, right? Not the whole play, just emotion, right? Just emotion. Now, I'm going to go over. It's my first night back, so I'm going to go over, all right? Let's talk about the goal line, man. Let's talk about the goal line because the goal line is different. The goal line is different from every part of the field, right? And there's no room to finesse, right? There's no room for a cute route of concepts, right, that you can run. There's no room for the kinds of clever misdirection that works anywhere else on the field, right? Everybody moves in the same direction, downhill, and they move it together with real and total conviction. This is the play you call when you're standing at the doorstep at the outcome you've been building toward the entire drive. And there is nothing left to disguise, nothing left to gather, nothing left to fake. And you know what? Most people lose it right here. They don't cross the finish. They don't cross the finish line. They don't cross the goal line. They don't score, right? Not at the opening kickoff, right? Because when nerves and when nerves, which are natural and expected, kick in, we're not talking about not in the middle of the drive. We're talking about when adjustments are still part of the process. We're talking about right at the goal line, right? Where hesitation costs the most because you're closest to the result. And where the fear of blowing it right before the finish line becomes louder than the conviction that you got there, that got you there in the first place, right? I've watched this happen in football, and I've watched it happen in life more times than I can even count. Somebody controls their choke point, reads the comm correctly, gathers their intelligence through motion, does everything right for 11 plays, and then freezes on the 12th play, standing at the 1 yard line and the exact outcome they said they wanted, and they never get it. They never get it, right? If you controlled your choke point, you read the comm correctly, and you gathered your intelligence through motion, the goal line call isn't complicated. It's just conviction. This is the part people don't want to hear because it sounds too simple for how much anxiety usually shows up in that very moment. Now, listen. I look, man, I'm no different. I am no different. I've been working on Vital Signal for as long as I can remember, and now I'm at the finish line. Right? We were supposed to have a release and a debut the other night, and it didn't happen. And I'm actually glad it didn't happen, but it's going to happen. It just pushes me closer to that goal of when it will debut, right? And I want you to sit with that, right? I want you to sit with that, right? Because there's no new information that's going to be coming to you, right? No new information. Because that's the play. You got to get over that 1 yard line, that goal line, right? And you already have everything you need to get you across it, right? Waiting doesn't produce more clarity. It just produces more time for fear to convince you that waiting is wisdom, and it's not. A lot of y'all right now, you need to start executing. Execute what you already know, right? The sovereign wedge, right? Not a leap of blind faith. A finish built on top of 3 plays of real preparation that already happened. The wedge isn't reckless because it comes last in the sequence after the control, after the read, after the motion. It's the most prepared play in the entire drive, even though it's the one that looks from the outside like pure conviction with nothing behind it. And this is the play that the declaration is ultimately asking you to run. Not the flashy multi-front read, not the clever play, the unglamorous one, right? The downhill, the zero hesitation finish. The exact moment when finishing is hardest because you're close enough to see exactly what you stand to lose if it doesn't work. I need you to call the play anyway. That's the whole arc compressed into one play. Name the goal line you're standing on right now while you're listening to this. You know the one I'm talking about. You've known it for a while, right? Now look, that's the sovereign wedge. Get to the goal. Score. Simplest way I can say it, right? Do the hard run, right? And that's the entire reason why this episode exists. Because everything before this moment was preparation. The play is the point. Cross the line. Score, right? And here's the part that I have to tell you guys. Look, I'm over. I need another 10 minutes, so stay with me, right? Stay with me. Here's the part that this is going to stink a little bit, right? And I wanted to, right? Because sitting down Sundays is not about being comfortable, right? It's about being uncomfortable, because uncomfortable is where the growth happens. Most people never actually call the play. They sit there at the 1 yard line, right? They just absorb it and they call it. And they say, oh, I'm staying humble. I'm not crossing the line. Oh, I'm not going to score. I'm going to celebrate getting to this moment, right? I'm going to be patient, right? They never let opportunity after and you know what? They let opportunity after opportunity walk past their formation. The very thing they've built an entire vocabulary around to make the absorption sound like wisdom instead of what it actually is. People, that's not patience. That's a team that never took the ball out of the huddle. And you try to dress it up, and you dress it up as hesitation, right? You try to dress it up in spiritual language, right? Surrender, trust, the process language, right? Waiting on time, and sometimes, and look, I want to be fair here. Listen, the language is legitimate sometimes, right? Shout out to Frank and Mel. Trust the process, right? There are seasons where waiting genuinely is the correct play, where premature action would be its own kind of turnover. And I'm not telling you every hesitation is fear, but often, more often than not, than any of us want to admit it to, it is. It is fear. And it's a costume of fear, right? And the costume is so well made that even the person wearing it can't always tell the difference anymore, right? The uncomfortable verdict is this. If you had the information you needed for months and you still hadn't moved, that's not faith. That's a turnover you're calling something nicer. And I need you to run an honest audit on that sentence right now. Tonight, this moment, right? Not tomorrow, not afterwards, right? But right now, right? And think about this. What's the decision you had that you had enough information on that you needed to make, and you had months to make it, maybe even longer, and you're still calling it? I'm waiting on God's timing, right? You've been waiting on God's timing for years, right? Not the right season. But you're still gathering information. But let's be honest about which of those is actually true and which one is a jersey of fear that you're wearing. And look, man, I talk about myself all the time. I'm not exempting myself from this, right? When I sat on the decision to do some of the different things that I do or I've done, right? There was a stretch of time where things took longer than I wanted them to, right? And I admit that, right? I told myself the lies. Oh, I'm being strategic, right? I told myself, oh, I'm being wise, right? Oh, I told myself, oh, I'm waiting for the right moment, right? Some of it was true, but some of it, if I'm being honest with you guys, and I'm being honest to my community, the smarts, final bosses, warriors, and motivators. Oh man, that felt good to say, right? The way I'm asking you to be honest with yourselves was fear wearing a strategy uniform, running out the clock on a decision I already knew I was going to make eventually. The test isn't whether hesitation ever feels uncomfortable to name, right? It's whether you're willing to name it anyway. Most people never call a play. Not because they lack the 4 plays I just gave you, but because naming their own hesitation honestly is harder than any play on that they could have did on the field, right? I need you to do that work tonight, right? Commit to it. That's the uncomfortable verdict. And that's the thing that we've been talking about. And that's what this whole premise is about, right? That's what I need. And I'm going to leave you with this before we move on into continuity, right? The community members I've watched actually transform in this community are never the ones with the clearest plan. They're the ones who got the honest built in them. And they got honest about the turnover first, out loud, before they even fixed it, right? They got honest with themselves, right? Now, yeah, I give me 10 more minutes, just 10. I'll be done. Just 10 more minutes, please. Everything in this episode is directly on top of the work that you've already been doing. The rebirth was about rebuilding identity after the fire, figuring out who you are when the old version of you didn't survive the season that came before it. That was season 4, first movement. And if you were in the community for it, you know it wasn't comfortable work. It asked you to sit in the ash before you were allowed to build anything new on top of it. And most of you did not. Most of you did that work. Yeah, most of you did that work, right? I got the emails and the letters. Most of you did it. And that's why the declaration is even possible for you now. Because the declaration assumes that the work is done and asks a harder question. Not that you know who you are, but will you actually act like it under pressure? That's a different test than the rebirth gave you. The rebirth tested your honesty. The declaration tests your follow through. It's one thing to know. It's one thing to know. In the quiet of a journey or the quiet of a journal entry, right? On a Sunday night during your reflection period, do you think about who you've become? That's a completely different thing to call the play that identity requires when the play clock is running out, when the coverage is disguised and there's real cost attached to getting it wrong. A rebuilt identity never gets tested in real conditions, right? It's just a nice story. And I want you to sit with that for a moment, right? Because it's easy to build a beautiful internal narrative about who you've become and never actually run that narrative through the conditions. A quarterback can watch film all offseason to develop a perfect mental model of himself as decisive and confident, right? None of that means anything until the lights are on, the crowd is loud, and the read has to happen in real life, under real pressure, with real consequences attached to it if you get it wrong. Look, one of my favorite quotes is by Mike Tyson, right? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. The play call is where the story becomes a track record. And that's what tonight's 4-play sequence is actually about. Not a new identity. You already did the work for that. You did that during the rebirth, right? Tonight is the mechanism for proving that identity is real. One decision at a time under conditions that didn't care how much personal growth you've done, right? Because if you can't execute, you can't execute. And you won't be able to do it when it counts. And that's what Arc 5 is all about, man. That's why it's called the declaration and not the announcement. A declaration isn't something you say once in a while, right? It's something you keep proving snap after snap, drive after drive, for the length of an entire season. Every play in tonight's sequence, HORMUZ Straight, multi-front motion, ceasefire play, action, sovereign wedge, is a small, repeatable act of declaration. You don't declare who you are once at the start of Arc 5, and then you decide to coast. You declare it every single time. You refuse to let hesitation call the play instead of you. That's the through line connecting, right? All the way to episode 299, right? And we're not talking about a dramatic moment. We're talking about of 29 straight weeks of repeatable proof, right? That's what makes the declaration harder than rebirth. Because in some ways, even though it sounds like an easier season on paper, the rebirth asks you to be honest once in the ash. The declaration asks you to be consistent week after week, long after the initial conviction has worn off. And all that's left is discipline, right? Now, we've been talking about choke points all night, man. This message right here, I need to talk to my warriors for a moment. Right? My warriors, this is for you, right? Because strategy without execution is just a nicely diagrammed play that nobody ran, right? I know this community, right? And I know that if you need a pep talk or something, or you need some help to be brave, you've already proven that in rooms that most people never walk into, right? What you need and what the play call actually is built to give you is the sequencing. Because bravery without sequencing burns out fast, and burns out are expensive. You already know what it costs to move when the room is loud and the outcome isn't guaranteed. That's not new information for you. Warriors who are in this community have deployed overseas, walked away from stable careers, started businesses with no safety net, had the hard conversations everybody else avoided. Courage isn't the gap in this room. What the play call adds is a system that keeps your courage from becoming recklessness, because those two things look identical from the outside and feel completely different from the inside. And the difference only shows up later in the outcome, right? You need to control your point of attack. Don't chase the flashy play before the foundation is secure. That is the correction I need most of my warriors to hear tonight, right? Because your instinct The same instinct that makes you valuable is to run straight at the hardest target, right? The most visible object. That instinct is an asset in the fourth quarter. It's a liability on the first play of the drive, because before you've established anything to respect, the HORMUZ straight before the sovereign wedge every single time. Not because the wedge isn't yours to run eventually, but because running it first out of sequence turns your conviction into a gamble instead of a finish, right? Execute in order, and your pressure becomes precision instead of just noise. That's the whole upgrade in tonight's episode, right? And that's for you, to my warriors, right? Not more courage. You have enough of that, right? And more than most of you will ever even access in the rest of your life, right? What you're missing sometimes is the discipline to run the control play before the finish play. The patience to gather intelligence through motion before you commit fully. The willingness to let a controlled run set up the wedge instead of trying to wedge your way through a defense that hasn't been softened yet, right? I've watched warriors in this community burn incredibly amounts of courage on plays that never had a chance because the sequence was wrong, not because the effort was wrong. Don't let that be your story in Arc 5, the Declaration. You have the hardest asset to build in this entire community already. Give it a system worthy of it. 4 plays, run it in order. That's not a limitation on your courage. That's what finally allowing the plan to work and get you the results you're looking for. Your courage was never the problem. It never will. Sequence was. Fix the sequence and watch your courage. And watch what your courage do, right? And watch what you're capable of doing. That's the entire correction that I have for my warriors, right? Not more fire, but better sequencing for the fire you already carry into the next room that you're getting ready to walk through, right? Now, as we get ready to close. Yes, I knew it. As we get ready to close, right? This is for my final bosses. Understand this. The version of you standing on the other side of the Declaration isn't the one who survived the loudest season. It's the one who called plays through it instead of getting called by it. That's the identity this arc is asking you to claim. Not as a slogan you repeat in the mirror, not as a caption under a photo, but a track record you can point to, specifically when this arc closes at episode 299. I want you to hear the difference in those versions of yourself because it is easy to blur them out. Surviving the loudest season means you made it through. That's nothing, right? That's not nothing, right? Give yourself a clap on the back, right? But it's passive, right? It happened to you and you endured it. We all endure a lot, right? But the endurance deserves nothing but respect. And that's not the same achievement that this arc is asking for, right? Because calling play through means you stayed the author of your own decisions, even while the noise around you was trying to write a story. That's the final boss standard. Not immunity from chaos, but authorship inside it, right? You already have everything you need to be the version of yourself. Every play tonight, the HORMUZ straight, the multi-front motion, the ceasefire play action, the sovereign wedge is available to you right now tonight with whatever situation you're currently standing inside of. The gap was never information. The gap was sequence, and now you have the sequence. Listen to my motivators. I'm going to close out, right? Closing out in 2 minutes, right? For motivators, your assignment tonight is simple, and I want you to actually do it before you close this app. Somebody in your circle is standing in your own huddle right now next to you, staring at a defense that looks unbeatable, waiting for a play that isn't coming unless they call it themselves. You know exactly what I'm talking about, and you know exactly who that person is. Their name is already in your head, renting rent free, right? Send them this episode, not because it fixes their situation, but because I can promise you it will, and neither can they promise themselves that it won't, right? Send it, because sometimes the only thing standing between somebody and their next move is watching one more person refuse to hesitate. That's the real function of the motivator in this community. Not cheerleading from the sideline, but modeling the play call publicly, consistently, so nobody else has the proof it's survivable to run it, right? Every person listening to this episode right now became a final boss partly because somebody else went first and showed them how the play was runnable. Be that person for somebody else, right? That's not extra credit. That's the actual assignment Motivators carries inside of this community every single week without hesitation. Send this episode to somebody while it's fresh, not next week when you've told yourself you would do it, but do it tonight. That's the motivation play. That's the motion play applied to the exact assignment that I just gave you, right? Final Bosses Motivators, that's your close for tonight. Claim the identity and put it to work for somebody else before this hour's even finished, right? We got a couple more minutes before we close, right? So we talked about the 4 plays. Right? HORMUZ straight to control your point of attack. Multi-front motion to read before you commit. Ceasefire play action to strike when the world relaxes. Sovereign wedge to finish with zero hesitation. That's the sequence. Right? Control it, read it, strike it, right? Finish it, right? Score. Write those 4 names down somewhere. You'll actually see them this week, not just the notes app, right? Write them down and never reopen them, right? But somewhere your eyes land daily, right? Because a play only works if you remember to call it. The world outside that door is still running its blitz tonight, right? Multiple fronts, disguised coverages, headlines that contradict each other by the hour. A ceasefire and a strike sharing the same news cycle. That was never going to change because we spent an hour talking about it, screaming at the TVs. And I'm not going to pretend that this episode altered anything happening in what's the world tonight, because it didn't. This was never the assignment. This was never what the episode was about. What changes is whether you walk out of this episode still standing in the huddle or whether you walk out having already called the play. That's the only variable this hour was ever built to move. And it's the only variable that was ever actually yours to control. And I said that in the beginning. Not the ceasefire, not the straight, but your huddle, your choke point, your emotion, your wedge. Now, go back through and look at all 4 plays this week. Identify the one choke point that, if secured, stabilize everything downstream of it. Send the trial balloon before you commit fully to the big move. Watch for the false calm in the world in your own life. And it doesn't let that soften your discipline, right? And when you're standing at your own goal line with everything already gathered, with everything already read, with everything already controlled, control the wedge. No information is coming. Execute what you already know. That's the declaration. That's the play call. Listen, that's our show. I'll see you guys again, man. We're back, baby. I'll see you again tomorrow night at 9 p.m. for Motivation Mondays. Listen, before we close, I want you to do one thing tonight and not next week, right? Pull up your notes app right now and write down your choke point. One sentence. Don't overthink it. Don't perfect it. Just name it. The single sentence is the first play of your own drive, and it's the only one on the board that I actually need from you, that you actually need from yourself. And that's what Arc 5, the declaration, is all about. And that's why it keeps moving. Everything else is the play call. And it only works downstream of those who are honest with themselves, right? That's what I've been talking about all night long. Control it, read it, strike it, finish it. Now go call your play. This has been Sitting Down Sundays, episode number 278, the declaration of play call. It is in the books. It is go time, baby. We're out of here. And if you know me, then you already know there's a heavy pain that comes with discipline, but there's an even heavier pain that comes with regret. And that, my friends, is our show. I am here. We are here. Be balanced. Be equal. Be smart. Have a great night. Woo! Go run that play.